मैम आवाज आ रही है आपको मेरी? हेलो मैम।
हेलो। हाँ जी।
जी मैम, ठीक है। लेक्चर स्टार्ट कर लिया मैम आपने?
अच्छा जी बेटा। ओके जी बेटा। हेलो, अस्सलाम वालेकुम एंड वेरी गुड मॉर्निंग टू ऑल ऑफ यू। अच्छा जी। सो I told you that today's topic is going to be a very important topic from your examination point of view and from even your practical point of view. Thyroid gland की particularly जो development है, development of thyroid gland, from a practical point of view, this is extremely important. जी, सो हम बात कर रहे थे डेवलपमेंट ऑफ थायराइड ग्लैंड की। आई एम जस्ट waiting for about half a minute, not more. I'll talk to you otherwise because I want more students to join. Ali खैरियत है? जी बेटा, मैं क्लास ले रही हूँ। Can I talk to you a little later? ओके, सो हम टंग की डेवलपमेंट मेरे ख्याल में शुरू कर लेते हैं। पहले टंग की कर लेते हैं एंड विल डू द थायराइड ग्लैंड a little later. बेटा, this is a diagram taken from your book and this is taken from Langman. आप दोनों books follow करते हो and hence you have this diagram because this explains a lot and a lot more beautifully than this diagram. So I projected this for you. Up the development of tongue, it starts in the first week, fourth week of intrauterine life. Fourth week of intrauterine life में the development of tongue starts. कहाँ से start होती है? From the floor of the mouth. Developing pharynx में from the floor of the mouth. ठीक है? अब इस floor of the mouth में first arch, ठीक है, आपको बताया था every arch has a dorsal end and it has an anterior end or a ventral end. So ventral and here this is taken running right from the center. Longitudinal section लिया हुआ है and this shows the anterior end of the arch. This has been taken, this is showing the inside of the developing pharynx, the inside of the pharyngeal arches. So what you see is this is the ventral end. So this would be the midline. This is the midline, the ventral end of the first arch, second arch, third arch, fourth arch. ठीक है, और आपको ये भी बताया था कि जो फर्स्ट आर्च है उसके दो कंपोनेंट्स होते हैं, maxillary process होता है और ये mandibular process होता है. That is why you see a notch or an indentation over here. ठीक है, so fourth week में from the floor of the developing pharynx. मैं ventral end की बात कर रही हूँ, ventral and medial part of the first arch. Floor of the developing pharynx में the first arch, mesenchyme in the first arch. This develops in the midline and a small proliferation, midline swelling because of proliferation of mesenchyme. This appears, this proliferation is this developing, ये यहाँ पे आपकी किताब में ये इस तरह छोटी सी एक midline swelling बनाई हुई है, ठीक है। इसको median lingual swelling कहते हैं, इसको tongue bud, median tongue bud कहते हैं, इसको tuberculum impar भी कहते हैं, ठीक है। Tuberculum impar, you should know this term because आपके examiners mostly they like to call it tuberculum impar, even though I feel कि median tongue bud जो है that is a better terminology because it explains a lot, easy to remember. So this, in the midline you have proliferation of mesenchyme from the first arch, forming a median lingual swelling. Then on either side, right and left, you have two swellings developing a little later, a day or two later than the median tongue bud. But yes, you have two elongated swellings. इनको two lateral swellings कहते हैं. So these are the two lateral lingual swellings, lateral tongue bud. So you have a midline swelling, median tongue bud, and two lateral lingual swellings, lateral tongue buds. Developing in the fourth week, floor of the pharynx, ventromedial end of the first arch. Now, this blue is the first arch. Okay, so you have lateral lingual swelling, ये, and in the midline, ये जो है ना blue में, this is the median lingual swelling. Now, immediately caudal to the, or immediately inferior to the, this is the second arch, yellow में. In pink, you have the third arch, and in brown, you have the fourth arch. So this is how the color code goes. So from the second arch, in the midline, immediately caudal to the this midline foramen cecum कहते हैं इसको, ठीक है? This is a small depression or a foramen present at the junction of the first and the second arch. First or second arch के junction in the midline, you have the small foramen which is called foramen cecum. So immediately caudal to the foramen cecum in the midline, you have this small proliferation of the second arch. Second arch की proliferation in the midline, immediately inferior to or immediately caudal to the foramen cecum. ये जो proliferation है, this is part of the second arch. Now from the third arch, caudal to the second arch, you have the third arch. So in the midline, you have a little larger proliferation from the third arch and another proliferation in the midline from the fourth arch. ये जो third arch और fourth arch की जो proliferation है in the midline, this is a lot larger than what you have in the from the other two, the first and the second के मुकाबले में. The third and fourth arches से जो proliferation है in the midline, they are larger and they develop as one. We'll just talk about a little later. ये जो third or fourth arch से जो proliferation है, together they are called hypobranchial eminence. Okay? This and this together make up the hypobranchial eminence. I repeat once again. मिडलाइन की बात कर लेते हैं. First, pharyngeal arch. Proliferation of mesenchyme in the midline, median, lingual swellings. Of course, इनसे दो lateral first arch से दो lateral proliferations भी होती हैं. You call them lateral lingual swellings, but in the midline you have a median lingual swelling. Then from the second arch you have a proliferation of mesenchyme, which is called copula. From the third arch and from the fourth arch, collectively you have this large median proliferation of mesenchyme. Collectively they are called hypopharyngeal eminence, which is contributed by the third arch and the fourth arch. अब इसको आगे करते हैं फॉलो. अच्छा जी. Now this is a book. This is taken from your book. Okay, अच्छी drawing दी हुई है. Now what happens is कि ये जो lateral lingual swellings है ना, ये rapidly the mesenchyme in these lateral lingual swellings, this proliferates rapidly. Okay, so rapid that it overgrows this median lingual swellings. So median lingual swellings get incorporated into it, yeah, becomes part of these lateral lingual swellings. Yeah, jo bhi hota hai. The thing to remember is that what's left is the two lateral lingual swellings, and the median lingual swelling becomes a part of this lateral lingual swellings. Okay? These two lateral lingual swellings plus this midline median lingual swellings, they grow rapidly and they make up the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. So a blue color को follow कीजिए. This is the midline, one lateral and two, one median and two lateral lingual swellings. Together they proliferate, the mesenchyme proliferates rapidly and develops into the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. Second arch से हमने, अच्छा अब ये जो फर्स्ट आर्च का जो था, ये ट्यूबरकुलम इम्पायर, ये जो मिड लाइन स्वेलिंग थी आपको बता दी, ये डिसअपीयर कर गई है. जस्ट वांटेड टू क्लियर व्हाट द ट्यूबरकुलम इम्पायर वाज. मैं फिर वापस जाती हूँ. हमने यहाँ पे किया था ये, दिस वाज ट्यूबरकुलम इम्पायर. ओके ओके, हाँ सर, you can see it over here, ट्यूबरकुलम इम्पायर. ओके, सेकंड आर्च से you had a contribution, a midline contribution, copula कहते थे उसको. ये disappear कर जाता है. So second arch की contribution, mesenchyme, that disappears. And now what happens? First arch anterior 2/3 of the tongue बन गई. Second arch disappear कर गई. Now let's talk of the anterior 2/3. बेटा anterior 2/3 जो है, the mesenchyme on both the sides, right and left, right lingual swelling, left lingual swelling, the mesenchyme proliferates rapidly. The mesenchyme of the two sides, they approach each other, join with each other, and you see a midline groove in the tongue. Anterior 2/3, if you see your tongue in the mirror, you see a midline groove. Okay, this is called median sulcus, median lingual sulcus. मगर यहाँ पे जो median mesenchyme है, that of the two sides, that remains separate. It is separated by a midline septum, which is present on the inside of the tongue. अभी जब हम इंशाल्लाह cross anatomy में tongue करेंगे, then I'll tell you the features. What you have to remember is on the surface that you see, dorsum of the tongue, your dorsal surface of the tongue, the one that you can touch on the upper surface of the tongue, you have a midline groove. This is because of fusion of the mesenchyme of the two sides. अच्छा जी, आगे चलते हैं। अब क्या होता है, आपको बताया था कि थर्ड और फोर्थ आर्च, इससे you had a large swelling in the midline which is called hypobranchial eminence. ठीक है, mesenchyme in this still proliferates, rapidly proliferate करेगा, and you have this the formation of this midline large structure which is called hypobranchial eminence. ये ठीक है, so this hypobranchial eminence, this rapidly proliferates and overgrows this midline structure developing from the second arch copula. So ये hypobranchial eminence runs over the copula so that the midline में ये जो structure था copula, that becomes is a part of this hypobranchial eminence. ये उसको overgrow कर जाता है, ठीक है। ये जो hypobranchial eminence थी, that was formed by the third arch pink में, fourth arch brown में. So the hypobranchial eminence being contributed by the third and the fourth arch, this becomes the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. ये सारा. So anterior 2/3 we said was taken from the first arch. Mesenchyme of the first arch develops into anterior 2/3. Mesenchyme from the third and fourth arch develops into posterior 1/3 of the tongue. अब इन दोनों के दरमियान junction जो है, junction is a V-shaped, inverted V-shaped midline groove. A V-shaped इस तरह के the concavity faces forwards, ये इस तरह, ठीक है। ये जो V-shaped structure है between the anterior 2/3 and the posterior 1/3, इसको sulcus terminalis कहते हैं. So this is present, this part of the tongue is called the body of the tongue, और ये जो posterior part है, posterior 1/3, इसको root of the tongue कहते हैं. बेटा बात ये है कि this is where the posterior 1/3 is where the tongue starts, इसलिए इसको root of the tongue कहते हैं. Root of a tree is where the tree starts from under the ground. So whenever you have the term root of something, that means this is where it starts. So posterior 1/3 is called the root of the tongue. Anterior 2/3 is the body of the tongue. इन दोनों के दरमियान junction जो है, that is sulcus terminalis. इसका जो apex है sulcus terminalis का, this faces backwards, and at the apex you have this small foramen which is called foramen cecum. ये जो मैंने आपको बताया था first और second arch के junction पे जो foramen था उसको foramen cecum कहते हैं. अब ये जो local mesenchyme of the arches, this develops into the connective tissue of the tongue and blood vessels in the tongue. ठीक है, muscles नहीं, not the muscles. The local mesenchyme of the arches, first to number 1 to 4, ये सब mesenchyme जो है, this develops into connective tissue and blood vessels in the tongue. Muscles कहाँ से आते हैं? The muscles of the tongue, they are contributed to the tongue by occipital myotomes. आपको पता है कि somites, if you remember your somites, paraxial mesoderm से somites थे, and somites में you have scleroderm, dermatome, myotome. Sorry, scleroderm, myotome, dermatome in that particular order from medial to lateral. So ये जो myotomes in the occipital region, they travel to this developing tongue. ठीक है? So the muscle is contributed by occipital myotomes. और ये जो आपको याद होगा कि जो myotomes जो हैं इनसे striated muscles बनते हैं. So occipital myotomes contribute striated muscles of the tongue. जबकि local mesenchyme मैंने आपको बता दी है. Mesenchyme से connective tissue और blood vessels बनते हैं. अच्छा, ये nerve supply of the tongue है ना बेटा, इसको आप लिख लो. और tongue में से सबसे important एक ही question आता है development में भी और gross anatomy में भी, and that is the nerve supply of the tongue. In fact, एग्जाम में तो जो क्वेश्चन आता है वो gross anatomy of the tongue पूछते हैं, और then the next part of the continuity of the same question is explain the anatomy of the tongue, nerve supply of the tongue, explain it on embryological basis. ठीक है? So आपने उसको explain करना होता है कि why do we have this इतनी ज्यादा nerve supply tongue की क्यों है. अब वो इतनी ज्यादा nerve supply क्या है? We'll divide it into anterior 2/3 and posterior 1/3, motor और sensory. motor को हम जल्दी से फारग कर लेते हैं, that is the easier part. motor nerve supply of the tongue मैंने आपको बताया था, the muscles of the tongue are contributed by occipital myotomes. ठीक है, except one muscle which is the palatoglossal, उसकी भी बात कर लेंगे. But all the rest of the muscles except palatoglossal, they receive their nerve supply from 12th cranial nerve, which is hypoglossal nerve. So the muscles of the tongue, except palatoglossal, these muscles come from occipital myotomes, and occipital myotomes, they receive their nerve supply from the 12th cranial nerve or the hypoglossal nerve. So when these occipital myotomes from the occipital somites, when they travel to the tongue, they bring their nerve supply with the tongue. That is the nerve supply which was 12th cranial nerve. So the muscles of the tongue are supplied by the 12th cranial nerve. One muscle which was not getting its supply from the palatoglossal, from the 12th cranial nerve was palatoglossal, and this palatoglossal received its nerve supply from 10th cranial nerve. ठीक है जी? So only one muscle अब आगे चलते हैं. अच्छा, एक चीज जो इसके पैपिले थे, ये valid और foliate papillae. I had this slide. I think I missed this. हाँ, papillae पे आ जाते हैं, टंग के papillae. Sorry, I missed the slide somehow. जी, the valid और foliate papillae जो होते हैं ना, they are the first to develop, and they get their supply from the 9th cranial nerve, which is glossal pharyngeal. जो fungiform papillae होते हैं, ये about 10th से 11th week में develop होते हैं, and they are later formed because they get their supply from chora tympani. Filiform जो हैं वो 10th से 11th week दरमियान once again develop होते हैं. Taste buds जो हैं 11th से 13th week में develop होते हैं. And why do their taste buds develop? They develop as a result of induction. अब ये interaction है, inductive interaction है between the epithelium of the tongue and the gustatory nerves. Gustatory means taste. जब भी ये word आए gustatory, that means taste. So all the nerves that are responsible for taste, tongue में the nerve which is responsible for taste is cauda tympani. वैसे तो खैर sensory nerve भी taste fibers contribute करती है 5, 7, 9 और 10 ये 4 nerves हैं जो taste fibers में contribute करती हैं. So because of these taste fibers, nerves that contribute taste fibers, because of inductive interaction between these nerves and the epithelium of the tongue, these taste buds develop. Or just to tell you, since आपको नहीं पता कि what exactly is the site where you have these taste buds, so for that matter, ये जो है taste buds, they develop on the dorsal surface of the tongue. They also develop from the epiglottis, palatoglossal arches में से posterior one third of the tongue में भी ये होता है, and oropharynx, wall of the oropharynx, posterior wall of the oropharynx. These are the sites where you have the taste buds. So between 11 to 13th week, all these taste buds develop. But the taste buds for bitter taste, ये जो है ना, they develop later. 26 to 28 weeks के दरमियान the taste for bitter taste, the buds for bitter taste develop. So अगर इस stage पे experimentally if you introduce any bitter taste in mouth of the baby, you can actually see the baby wincing on ultrasound. अच्छा जी, nerve supply भी आ गई. अब हम आ जाते हैं इसकी anomalies की तरफ. You can see this tongue, such a large tongue. Yeah. It's not even fitting into the mouth. ठीक है, barely fitting into the mouth. Squeeze करके कर ही देता है बच्चा. Anyway, this condition is called macroglossia. The large tongue is called macroglossia. अब ये होता क्यों है? One of the reasons is the muscles in the tongue, they undergo hypertrophy. They the size of the muscle increases. Muscular hypertrophy की वजह से या फिर ये lymphatic vessels in the tongue, उनका tumor lymphangioma कहते हैं. Any angioma is a benign tumor. So a benign tumor of the lymphatic vessels of the tongue. या फिर it could be indicative of an underlying problem, and that underlying problem is Down syndrome. Down syndrome में भी macroglossia होता है. ठीक है. Microglossia on the other hand, ये देख लीजिए what a small tongue this is. This is even smaller. This is microglossia. Normally, the tongue, if you feel your tongue, let your tongue rest in your mouth, and you will realize that the tongue normally covers the teeth, rests on the teeth. यहाँ पे it is lying within the these arches, within the gums. Okay? It is so small. ये तो बिल्कुल छोटी है. So this abnormally small tongue is called microglossia. Now, when you have a small tongue, इसका jaw देखिए. It's a very small jaw. This small jaw is because of an underdeveloped mandible. This underdeveloped mandible or a small lower jaw is called micrognathia. ये G इसमें silent है. ये G. This is silent. It is micrognathia. ठीक है जी. Ankyloglossia, tongue tie, जिस आप लोगों ने, you have this thing. इसके नीचे तंदवा होता है. ज़बान के नीचे कहते हैं ना, ज़बान के नीचे तंदवा होता है. So this is what is called a tongue tie. It goes up to the tip of the tongue, so tongue के movements जो हैं वो disturb होती हैं. It hinders the movements of the tongue. But then with time, generally stretch कर जाता है and comes to lie. Posteriorly भी move कर जाता है, so it frees the tongue, the tip of the tongue. But sometimes parents feel apprehensive and they bring the baby over. Okay, ये इसको काट दें. If it is interfering with speech, तो फिर उसको incise किया जाता है. Otherwise we just leave it alone. इसको we don't do anything with it. ठीक है. अच्छा जी, lingual cysts and fistulae. अब आपको अभी बताया ये टंग है, ये this is the tongue. ठीक है. This is the foramen cecum. Anterior 2/3 and lower posterior 1/3 के junction पे foramen cecum है. Foramen cecum से you have this developing thyroid gland. So इसको thyroglossal duct है that passes through the tongue from the forehead, starting from the foramen cecum. If normally ये thyroglossal duct जो है ये degenerate कर जाती है. If part of the thyroglossal duct remains inside the tongue, and if that ends up becoming a cystic swelling, इसको lingual thyroglossal cyst कहते हैं. Lingual cyst कहते हैं या lingual thyroglossal cyst कहते हैं. If it enlarges, obviously the tongue is going to get enlarged. If the tongue gets enlarged, it's going to produce difficulty in swallowing because it produces obstruction. So it produces difficulty in swallowing. या उसको dysphagia कहते हैं. Difficulty in swallowing is also called dysphagia. Lingual fistula. The lingual part of the thyroglossal duct, if it persists and it forms a communication with the foramen cecum. So this cyst is going to open into the inside of the mouth. The foramen cecum to ये है. So this communication of the cyst with the surface, this is called fistula, a lingual fistula. Chalo ji, now we come to a very, very important topic, which is the development of thyroid gland. Beta, thyroid gland जो है, this is the first endocrine gland to develop in the embryo. 24th day पे ये develop होता है. Please इसको इसी तरह याद रख लीजिए, because once upon a time there was a question in your exam. Give the embryogenesis of the first endocrine gland to develop in an embryo. तो वो बच्चों को नहीं याद रहा कि ये thyroid gland होता है. किसी ने pituitary लिखा, किसी ने adrenal लिखा. They mentioned all the endocrine glands. ठीक है. Half the class wrote thyroid gland, which was the correct answer. So जिन्होंने बाकियों की development लिखी, that was the wrong answer. It got crossed out. 5 नंबर तक सवाल था, तो 5 नंबर गए. अच्छा जी, so post fertilization, this is the first endocrine gland to develop. कैसे develop होता है? Midline में, floor of the pharynx, developing pharynx. In the midline, there's proliferation of the endoderm. Now we are talking of endoderm only. ठीक है? Pharynx, I'm so sorry. Inside of the pharynx is lined by endoderm. Midline में proliferation इस level पे. Proliferation of endoderm in the midline. Because of this proliferation, the endoderm thickens. So a thickening, median endodermal thickening. Floor of the pharynx. किस जगह पे? Midline, floor of the pharynx at the junction of first and second arch. फर्स्ट आर्च रेड में, ब्लू में सेकेंड आर्च है. सो एट द जंक्शन ऑफ द फर्स्ट एंड सेकेंड आर्च मिड लाइन में एंडोडर्मल थिकनिंग है. ये देख लीजिए, ये यहाँ पे फोरामन सीकम के लेवल पे देयर इज एंडोडर्मल थिकनिंग. ये इधर फोरामन सीकम है. सो दिस इज द साइट फ्रॉम वेयर द एंडोडर्मल थिकनिंग है. This would start. Now, this endodermal thickening, as it grows larger, it develops into an outpocketing or a diverticulum. ये देख लीजिए, an outpocketing. ठीक है? This is called the thyroid diverticulum. ये thyroid diverticulum है. This thyroid diverticulum then descends. यहाँ से it descends. As it descends, it enlarges. The endoderm goes on dividing. To begin with, तो ये hollow diverticulum होता है. This diverticulum, to begin with, is hollow, but then the endodermal lining goes on dividing, proliferate करती है, and it fills this diverticulum with cells. So the cells fill up the diverticulum. As it enlarges, this diverticulum then divides into two lobes, right and left. So this diverticulum now becomes a bilobed structure. ये देखिए, ये. Now, as it descends, I told you this diverticulum, as it forms, it begins to descend. कहाँ descend करता है? Passes यहाँ से junction of the anterior 2/3, posterior 1/3. यहाँ से it starts, it descends. Outside the tongue, it passes in front of the hyoid bone. ये hyoid bone है. Then it passes in front of the thyroid cartilage. अब ये जो thyroid cartilage है, this is part of the larynx. So hyoid bone, the larynx, and comes to lie in front of the trachea. ठीक है? Larynx के नीचे trachea है, it comes to lie in front of the trachea. Fifth week में, अब अभी तक, what has happened is so far this gland is connected to here, this point, foramen cecum, through this duct. ये जो duct है, that connects this thyroid gland to the foramen cecum. Up to the 5th week, this remains this connection between the thyroid gland and foramen cecum. This is in the form of a duct which is called thyroglossal duct. 5th week में जाके ये duct जो है, this breaks up and then disappears. Normally ये thyroglossal duct जो है, this disappears. By the 7th week, ये जो gland है, thyroid gland, this comes to lie in its final position, और final position जो है, that is over here, in front of the trachea. On either side of the trachea, जो इसका, the two lobes are connected by a piece of thyroid gland. This piece of thyroid gland, which connects the right and left lobes, called the isthmus of the thyroid gland. The isthmus lies in front of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th tracheal rings. Embryo में 2nd and 3rd में, and when it grows in the adult, it covers the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th tracheal rings. Okay? So thyroid gland comes to lie in its final position on either side of the trachea. Up the only indication that there was once upon a time a thyroglossal duct is the presence of foramen cecum. Foramen cecum persist करता है, thyroglossal duct normally disappear कर जाती है. Then I also told you that when we were doing the development of pharyngeal arches, so I told you, sorry, that the 5th arch in fact 4th arch say ultimobranchial body develop होती है, ठीक है? And I told you, as the fourth arch or the fifth, whatever you want to call it, as it descends, it passes posterior to the thyroid gland. The superior thyroid gland gets attached to the posterior surface of, parathyroid. The superior parathyroid gland gets attached to the posterior surface of the thyroid. जबकि जो ultimobranchial body है, that also gets attached to the posterior surface of the thyroid gland, but then it penetrates into the gland. Ultimobranchial body penetrates into the gland. In the gland, it breaks up into pieces, small pieces that then spread out inside the substance of the thyroid gland. These small pieces of ultimobranchial body, they develop into parafollicular cells or C cells, calcitonin producing cells, parafollicular cells, you know all that. हम इसको in detail discuss कर चुके हैं. अच्छा, अब what happens is कि in about 50% of cases, a small lobe arising from the isthmus of the gland, ये thyroid gland है, ये इसका isthmus है. A small lobe arising from the isthmus of the gland, this may persist. This is called pyramidal lobe of the gland. ये कोई abnormality नहीं है. This is just a variation of the norm. ठीक है? लेकिन the interesting thing is कि फिर ये जो इस pyramidal lobe है, this remains connected to the foramen cecum. ये अब thyroglossal duct जो थी आपकी, by this thyroglossal duct, it remains connected. Sorry, foramen cecum नहीं, hyoid bone. ये hyoid bone है. This is the hyoid bone, so it remains connected to the hyoid bone. ये जो thyroglossal duct है, this gets shriveled out, fibrous tissue इसमें develop हो जाता है. Sometimes even muscle fibers is connecting fibrous tissue में develop हो जाते हैं. These muscle fibers develop into a muscle which is called levator glanduli thyroidi. Levator glanduli thyroidi. I repeat once again, this pyramidal lobe of the thyroid gland, this remains connected to the hyoid bone through this thyroglossal duct. However, ये जो thyroglossal duct है, this degenerates and gets converted into fibrous tissue. अगर इस fibrous tissue में muscle develop हो जाए तो उस muscle का नाम है levator glanduli thyroidi. Quickly इसकी histogenesis कर लें. I told you, in the thyroid gland develops as a mass of endodermal cells, a solid mass of endodermal cells. So ये जो solid mass है endodermal cells, इसके अंदर vascular mesenchyme invade कर जाती है. So this solid mass develops into two lobes, right and left, which is connected by an isthmus. Okay? So इस solid mass में in vascular mesenchyme enter कर जाती है. Because of entry of the vascular mesenchyme, the cells break up. The solid cells, they break up to form cords. And then these cords anastomose to form a network. Okay? अब ये जो vascular mesenchyme थी, this develops into capillaries. So the cords are broken up by a network of capillaries, and these cords then get converted into and become connected to each other by epithelial anastomosis of get anastomosed to each other. अब the next thing is ये जो anastomosing cords हैं, they all collect together and form multiple groups of cells. Anastomosing cords, ये epithelial cords, they break up into cell groups. In groups of cells, as they enlarge, between them, inside these groups of cells, develops a lumen. So एक lumen develop होता है इस groups of cells में, cell clusters, उनके अंदर एक lumen develop होता है. Now this structure, group of cells with a lumen inside, this is called a follicle of the thyroid gland. 11th week में approximately ये follicles appear करते हैं. 10th week तक तो cell groups ही होते हैं, clusters of cells ही होते हैं. 11th week में lumen develop करता है and follicles mature करते हैं, and when the follicles mature, उनके अंदर colloid produce होना शुरू होता है. So 10th week तक, early 10th week तक you have cell clusters. Late 10th week में follicle develop होता है. 11th week में colloid appear करता है. And by the 35th week, इतने हार्मोन प्रोड्यूस हो रहे होते हैं जितना आगे जाके एडल्ट लाइफ में प्रोड्यूस हो रहे हैं. अब इस सारे जो फॉर्मेशन ऑफ हिस्टोजेनेसिस जो है, इस सारी हिस्टोजेनेसिस में एपिडर्मल ग्रोथ फैक्टर इज इन्वॉल्व्ड. Congenital hypothyroidism, that is the primary cause. इसमें जो reason is कि the thyroid gland has not developed properly. There's some derangement in the development of thyroid gland. Thyroglosal cyst and sinus. बच्चे आपको बताया था there's a thyroglosal duct, ठीक है, starting from the foramen cecum, connecting it to the thyroid gland. Normally ये thyroglosal duct degenerate कर जाती है and it disappears. But along the course of this thyroglosal duct, a part of this duct may persist. वैसे तो persist करे, it doesn't make any difference. Part of it, if it develops some secretions into them, and then it develops into a large swelling, which is called a cyst. The cyst of thyroglossal duct. This is how it looks like. In the midline, this swelling is called a thyroglossal duct cyst. ठीक है जी? Generally, up to 5 years पे जाके ये appear करता है. Mostly इसमें कोई symptoms नहीं होता, except कि there is a swelling in the midline. So it looks unsightly. Doesn't look nice. But otherwise, there's no pain, nothing. It moves. It's a mobile mass. It keeps on growing as the child grows. Now, at times, ये होता है कि इसमें कोई thyroid tissue भी होता है, since it is in the pathway of the descending thyroid gland. Thyroglossal duct में है, so it may contain some thyroid tissue. Sometimes what happens is कि इसमें infection हो जाती है. In that case, this infection causes the cyst to enlarge, even it causes the cyst to rupture. When it ruptures, it opens on the surface of the skin. Through the skin, अब ये cyst जो है, ये देख लीजिए, through the skin, it is communicating with the exterior. So this thyroglossal cyst now becomes a thyroglossal sinus. Okay. So this is generally lying anterior to the thyroid cartilages. Ectopic thyroid tissue, there are multiple sites where you may have ectopic thyroid tissue, since the gland starts from here. The development of the gland starts from here, and it has to descend down into the neck, in front of the trachea. Ye larynx hai, ye trachea. So on the other side of the trachea. So what happens is, during its descent, it may leave parts of pieces of gland may remain here or there. They may lie inside the tongue, which is called lingual thyroid. ये lingual thyroid आपको generally autopsically मिलता है unless thyroid gland enlarges, तो फिर that is a different issue, लेकिन otherwise तो ये autopsy पे मिलता है 1 in 4,000 cases में clinically observe कर सकते हैं आप, that is in case the gland enlarges. Sublingual gland, sublingual thyroid below the tongue, anywhere below the tongue, ठीक है. One has to be cervical region में हो सकता है. One has to be very careful. A person comes with a swelling or a cyst in these regions, in the cervical region or in the sublingual region, and he or she asks the doctor to remove this swelling because it is bothering the patient. One has to be very careful to observe, because this may be the only thyroid gland present. So before you remove this ectopic thyroid, please make sure that the normal thyroid is present. If the normal thyroid is not present and you remove this cyst or ectopic thyroid, then obviously the person is going to be without a thyroid gland for the rest of his or her life. So one has to be very careful on removing any abnormal cyst present in the head and neck region. Paraglossal fistula, ये cyst थी, इसमें infection हुई, अभी एक fistula बन गया. So paraglossal cyst may communicate with the surface, opening in the midline. ये paraglossal fistula जो है, at times though very rarely it may present at the time of birth, but generally ऐसा नहीं होता. Generally paraglossal cyst ही होती है. This cyst में infection develop हो जाती है. Because of the infection, the overlying skin ruptures, and this is what happens. The person develops the fistula. Accessory thyroid tissue, it may appear in the thymus, inferior to the thyroid gland. आपको पता है the thymus passes inferiorly, passing close to the thyroid gland, so it may carry some bit of thyroid gland with it. अब ये जो accessory thyroid tissue है, this could be functional, or mother, it is not big enough to maintain normal thyroid function. It may develop in the neck, lateral to the thyroid cartilages, lies on the thyroid. और अब आता कहाँ से है? From the remnants of thyroglossal duct. So thyroid cartilages के in the vicinity of the thyroid cartilages वहाँ हो सकता है. In the thyroid, in the thymus वहाँ पे हो सकता है. Usually ये 2-3 sides होती हैं, because as the thymus descends close to the thyroid gland, it carries some bit of thyroid tissue with it. At times, thyroid gland cells develop in karta, so it remains absent. Or the entire gland may be absent, or one of its lobes may be absent. Usually, left lobe ही deficient हुआ करता है. Reason we still don't know, but could be mutation हो जाती है. Thyroid stimulating hormones. The receptors for these hormones, they undergo mutations. So, because of this mutation, the thyroid gland fails to develop. ये वही thyroglossal cyst. This is a large thyroglossal cyst. Now, thyroglossal duct normally तो disappear कर जाती है, लेकिन if it persists, so a swelling may appear at the base of the tongue or inferior to the hyoid bone. चलें जी, ये हम इंशाल्लाह we'll do this next time. Development of salivary glands. आप मुझे बताइए कि any questions? Any questions, please? Anything you want me to repeat? Anything you want me to explain? Thank you, Nafsudra. Good, good. You asked me this, God. I'm so happy with you because beta, this is extremely important. Gross maybe or embryology maybe, because question yahi aata hai, explain the, give the nerve supply of the tongue and explain it on the basis of embryology. Yeah. Sensory nerve supply. बेटा सेंसरी नर्व सप्लाई दो किस्म की होती है और वो दो किस्म की, एक जनरल सेंसेशंस है. जनरल सेंसेशन से मुराद है द सेंसेशन ऑफ टेम्परेचर, टच, आपको खाना, यू फाइंड आउट हाउ हॉट द फूड इज. ठीक है. दूसरी सेंसेशन टेस्ट की है, हाउ टेस्टी द फूड इज. सो जो जनरल सेंसेशंस हैं they come from the lingual nerve. इसलिए क्योंकि anterior 2/3 of the tongue that is developed from the first arch. First arch की nerve mandibular थी. अब mandibular की ये एक nerve की branch है, lingual nerve. So endoderm या epithelium of the first arch comes from lingual nerve, which is a branch of mandibular division of trigeminal. ठीक है. दूसरी फेशियल. फेशियल सेकेंड आर्च की नर्व है. सेकेंड आर्च की हमने कहा था डिसअपियर कर जाती है, इट इज ओवरग्रोन बाय द फर्स्ट आर्च, लेकिन उसकी नर्व जो है वो रह जाती है, उसकी नर्व परसिस्ट कर जाती है. एंड दिस फेशियल नर्व हैज अ ब्रांच कॉर्डा टिम्पैनाई. ये कॉर्डा टिम्पैनाई लिंगुअल के साथ ही ट्रैवल की थी. इट इज पार्ट ऑफ द फेशियल नर्व, लेकिन outside the skull it traveled with the lingual nerve. ये जो this supplies the taste fibers, it brings taste fibers to the tongue. ये taste buds को supply करती है. ठीक है. In fact taste buds बनते ही इसलिए हैं because endodermal interaction होती है with the taste nerves और वो chorda hai. So chorda tympani, which supplies the second arch, provides taste fibers to the tongue. ठीक है. अब valid papillae, circumvalid papillae, ninth cranial nerve. उसकी वजह ये है कि आपको पता है valid papillae are lying at the junction of anterior 2/3 and posterior 1/3 of the tongue. These papillae are pulled back, the mucosa is pulled back, so the valid papillae are supplied by the ninth cranial nerve. Posterior 1/3 में everything is supplied by the ninth cranial nerve. इसमें taste fibers भी, इसमें epithelium, जो general sensory fibers, taste fibers, everything is supplied by the ninth cranial nerve. Ninth cranial nerve is the nerve of the third arch. और fourth arch की superior laryngeal nerve. I'll continue with this next time. आपको मैं ये nerve supply दोबारा explain कर दूँगी. For now, it is Khuda Hafiz. Inshallah, I'll see you next week. नहीं बेटा, टेस्ट नहीं है. We will do the continue with the anatomy lecture.